Numerous nuclear and military facilities around Iran have mysteriously exploded or caught fire over the past few weeks, and Israel's Mossad is taking responsibility. Many fear Israel is trying to bait Iran into a military conflict, which means the U.S. could end up at war with the country. So where were the attacks? How do we know it was the Israelis? What has been Iran's response? We're going to go over that. But first, please subscribe to the channel. Also, please subscribe to my email newsletter. You can sign up on the link down below in the description, just in case something happens to the channel. You know, you never know these days with a lot of censorship and deplatforming. Sign up for my email newsletter. That way I can get a hold of you directly. I can directly deliver my content to you. Again, that link is down in the description. So let's go over this string of attacks. Now, there have been numerous attacks, dozens of attacks, in fact, or I should say mysterious explosions, mysterious fires that have broken out all around Iran over the last several months. But just in the last 2 weeks, let's go over what's gone on just in this little time frame. June 26th, there was a blast at a ballistic missile complex. June 26th, there was a fire at a power plant causing a blackout. June 30th, there was an explosion at a clinic in Tehran responsible for 19 deaths. That included 15 women and 4 men. July 2nd, there was a blast and a fire at the Natanz nuclear facility. That one was a big one. And that is, all of these attacks had been going on, and these explosions and these fires. And finally, when the Natanz nuclear facility had the explosion there, the Iranians could no longer really turn a blind eye to what was going on. July 3rd, there was a large fire that broke out in Shiraz. July 4th, there was an explosion and fire at a power plant. Another one, July 4th, there was a chlorine leak at a petrochemical plant. July 7th, there was a blast in an industrial zone outside of Tehran that resulted in 2 deaths. July 12th, a fire broke out at a petrochemical plant. July 14th, an aluminum factory caught fire. July 15th, a large fire broke out at a shipyard. So you can see this is a lot of fires, a lot of explosions, and it's happening at, interestingly, nuclear facilities, power plants, kind of industrial factories like aluminum factories, petrochemicals. So these have all been happening. It's been a string of attacks. The Iranian people very much know that they're under attack. They say that they guess each day. They wake up each day and they guess which one's going to explode next or which place is going to catch on fire next. So this is not lost on everybody over there what is going on. Now, for a while there, the Iranians were pretty much publicly denying any sort of sabotage, even though the reports were coming out that the officials in Iran were suspecting it. They publicly were just saying, oh, these were just freak accidents that kept happening over and over and over again. But when the big explosion happened at the nuclear power plant at Natanz, they really couldn't turn a blind eye to it anymore. And they had to say, look, okay, we're under attack. And how do we know it was the Israelis? Well, they pretty much have admitted to it. A Middle Eastern official told the New York Times that Israeli intelligence were responsible for the nuclear facility explosion. And the Israeli foreign minister, Gabi Ashkenazi, said at a press conference on July 5th that in regard to Iran, he says, quote, we take actions that are better left unsaid, unquote. So he was kind of alluding to this happening. Well, also, a former Israeli defense official told Business Insider that it was common knowledge in Israeli intelligence circles that at least some of the events in Iran over the past month were the work of Israeli intelligence operations. He says, quote, I don't know which ones exactly and wouldn't tell you anyway, because the entire point is for the Iranians to feel considerable stress trying to decide what might have been our work, they said. Then the Israeli media, so this was an anonymous person that Business Insider said they knew who it was. New York Times said they knew who it was, but this was an anonymous person that they weren't revealing their identity to the rest of us. But the Israeli media came out and confirmed that it was Mossad's head, Yossi Cohen, who was behind the leaks. Apparently, Avdor Lieberman, he's a prominent member of the Knesset. He said during a radio interview, quote, an intelligence official says that Israel is responsible for an explosion in Iran on Thursday. The country's entire security echelon knows who it is. I expect the prime minister to shut the leaker's mouth, especially since he has started his Likud primary campaign. So he didn't say directly who it was, but then everybody in the media in Israel knew who he was talking about. So they revealed the name of the guy. So it's the head of Mossad, Yossi Cohen. He's also, by the way, Cohen has been mentioned as a potential successor to Netanyahu if Netanyahu doesn't, eventually Netanyahu's not going to be in power at some point, not sure when. He keeps losing elections and then but remaining in power. So And that's a whole different, if you don't know what's going on with their elections and they're constantly in a stalemate over there in Israel, there's some other videos that you can watch, and those links are down below. Now, why would Israel be attacking Iran? Well, one theory is they've just decided to take matters into their own hands. So they've realized that we're not coming to a nuclear agreement with Iran. And so they've just decided to go ahead and start sabotaging Iran's nuclear plants and power plants and other facilities just in order to halt them from making any progress with their potential nuclear program. That's one theory. The explosion at Natanz definitely puts them back a couple of years. So it's a pretty legitimate theory. However, what we know is that we've been trying to goad Iran into a war for quite some time. And there is a theory that the Israelis, working alongside with some American operatives, realize that right now, you know what, the world's not paying attention to anything except for the virus. So now is a really good time to start poking the bear and seeing if we can get them to actually make a move. We were trying to get them into a war for quite some time, especially when Bolton was in office in the Trump administration. When John Bolton was in there, he's a big warmonger. But Iran was never really taking the bait. We took out General Soleimani, and Iran kind of retaliated with sort of a show and nothing that would result in war. There was a big worry that we were about to go to war at that time. And nothing has worked. There's been nothing to really get them to take the bait and to go to war. And now, with everybody focused on the virus, now if these explosions were happening in Iran, you got to think, a year and a half ago, especially around the time when General Soleimani was killed, if these explosions were happening around that time, you could imagine it would be front and center news every single day. But right now, everybody's focused on the virus. So right now is a really good time for the Israelis to, under the radar, start to sabotage Iran, to start to try to poke them and prod them. Now, flip the tables around. If the United States started to have all these fires and these explosions and we knew it was Iran that was behind them, we would already be at war. If Iran was doing this to the Israelis, going in and blowing up some of their facilities and setting fires inside of Israel, we would already be at war. But Iran does it, and we're poking them and poking them and poking them. And finally, if they do eventually retaliate and say, okay, fine, enough is enough, and they hit us back, suddenly we're going to say, oh, they deserve it. Look at what they've done. It's time to go to war with them. And because the American public is not paying attention to all of these attacks that are happening on Iran, if Iran retaliates, that's the only news people are going to get. They're not going to hear about all of these explosions and fires that were made against Iran in order to bait them into this war. They're only going to hear about Iran attacking. Iran attacks Israel or Iran attacks the United States. And now this means war. So clever, right? Clever to do all of these attacks when everybody's really focused on something else. And if Iran then retaliates, which is what they're hoping for, then all of a sudden they give us reason to go to war. Now is a time that is really... It's crucial for this to happen now. If you were looking at this from an Israeli or from a Trump administration perspective, the Israelis really, really, really want to keep Trump in office. They have an invested interest in him being the American president. They get away with everything with Trump in the White House. He is the most Israeli-friendly president that the U.S. has had. So it's in their interest to keep Trump in power. The way to keep him in power is to go to war. They know that right now he's losing the battle when it comes to COVID-19, that he's really not looking so great, losing favor with the American people. Going to war is one way to ensure that the president remains in power. So they could be trying to bait them into a war now. They're going full court press, trying to get the Iranians so pissed off that they retaliate in order to get us into a war before the November election. That is a really big possibility. Now, what has been Iran's response? Nothing, really. Here's the thing. Iran's not taking the bait. Iran's smarter than we give them credit for. They have consistently been poked and prodded, and over we've attempted regime change in Iran. There was the Iraq invasion of Iran. There was there have been numerous attempts to create uprisings in Iran, and the numerous things that we've done in order to upset them, including taking out General Soleimani. And really, Iran has remained very measured and very controlled. very surprisingly and quite frankly, it's kind of admirable that they've been able to remain so controlled under the circumstances. Because like I said, the United States would absolutely have already gone to war by now had Iran taken out one of our generals, had Iran been doing all of the things that we do to them and that the Israelis do to them. We would have already declared war by now. But they're taking a very measured, controlled response. They're very patient, I would say, and they're smart, because really they know that getting angry and retaliating is only going to lead them into a war, and they don't want to go to war because they understand what that means. So, what are the chances that they would win the war? I don't think either side would win a war. If the U.S. and Israel decided to go to war with Iran, I think it would end up like another Afghanistan. It's just a war that would take forever and ever and ever. 20 years, 30 years go by, and eventually they win. I mean, that's what we're seeing in Afghanistan with the Taliban. Go in, try to take the Taliban out. And in the end, now we're having to do a deal with the Taliban and we're having to get out. So I think, but it's devastating for both sides. Iran doesn't want that, even though they probably they would win that war. Who really wins in that scenario? So Iran understands that, and they're not really wanting to get into it. And so they've remained very measured and controlled on this. So this is just the latest of the efforts to try to bait Iran into a war. And if you want to know some background as to why we continue to try to bait them into the war, the real reason why we've been at it with them, you can watch some of my previous videos on the real history of how we got to this point. Those links are down below. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, please subscribe to my email newsletter. And that way I can always ensure that I can get in contact with you if something were to suddenly happen. So thank you again so much. Thank you again for watching.